those times when you're ambling along, walking, disconnected from the real world with your headphones on, as is the norm these days, trying to ignore the gazillion things that run through your brain, every minute, forgetting to kind of look both ways when you're crossing the road, behind you, above you. And then, some music comes on and stops you dead in your tracks, hopefully when you've crossed the road. Well, for me, that's Emma Swift's upcoming album, The Resurrection Game, out on 12th of September. It's no exaggeration. It's really stunning songwriting, musicianship, and arranging. Anyway, in the press notes, there was a quote from Emma about the experience that motivated the record that really sort of stuck out for me, and that was, "It's a bummer of a record." I'm only kidding. It was the one that really sort of stood out for me was her saying, "I'm a big believer in the redemptive power of art," and me too. I really sort of identify with that. Music, design, painting, poetry, sculpture, whatever creativity you're drawn to is absolutely 100% redemptive from, whether it's your trauma, from your pain, your rage, your anguish. Making art is such a powerful means of expression. Sometimes quite often sort of saying things that you've really got no words for. Anyway, I'm delighted to welcome Emma to talk about this really unique record. Her own, experiences, and how she's used her mindset really to sort of navigate through not only an incredibly traumatic period in life, but also how it's helped to to shape her into who she is today. So Emma, welcome. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
How are you doing? We were just before we went on to camera. You're pretty much in the middle of a tour. You got a couple of dates coming up, and then back onto a kind of like wider sort of finish off the wider US tour. How does it feel to be sort of playing the new songs?
Oh, it's wonderful feeling. I
Yeah,
think that you talked a little bit about the redemptive power of art, which I do
yeah,
believe in terms of the making of a record and what
yeah,
it's like to do that process. But a record isn't really done to me until you're presenting it live
yeah,
and sharing it with people. There's something really magical about singing the songs and having people sing the response on
yeah,
people's voices. Like
mm,
it can it can feel at times when you make a record that you just pop it online and fingers crossed, hope for the best,
yeah,
hope that people see it. But when you're playing a gig, there's evidence that the music
yeah.
has connected with folks, and it's not something I take for granted. I feel really lucky to be able to do that.
There's something, yeah. There's something, I guess, different about. I mean, the live shows. Obviously, there are people there, so there is that connection, which it kind of feels like without getting into a discussion about the state of music, but it feels like that is a, a the live piece is the part, even now now especially, that is so much more important, because I think music, listening to music is a much more of a disconnected kind of experience than perhaps it was.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, so my
Mm,
experience of music is like really different to the experience that young folks are going through
yeah,
today. I remember going to the record store and kind of
yeah,
eagerly anticipating the new Cranberries album, or
yeah, yeah,
you know, the
yeah.
Sundays, that kind of stuff. And now it's sort of like you wake up and it's on your phone if you if you
Absolutely,
want it.
absolutely. Yeah,
But you're right. Like, so the live experience is more like that. You buy a gig ticket and then you eagerly await the day that that show happens.
yeah,
And you can see the way. I mean, with my music, the music really shape shifts in the live show, because the album itself, The Resurrection Game, has quite a lot of instrumentation. It's a full band, and then there's really delicate string
yeah,
arrangements as well. But I'm a much more low budget person. So it's much more like when I go on tour, at least at the moment. For the most part, it's much more like being a folk singer. It's
yeah,
me and one guitarist, and so the songs sort of present themselves in a much
yeah.
more stripped back fashion than they do on the record.
I,
I would love to, I'd love to have the budget to do full band shows,
full
and
bands,
I
yeah.
will in some places. But yeah, it's a different sonic experience as well.
Which I kind of quite like that, because I do like this sort of idea of songs being almost like, living things that can sort of change with you dependent on your circumstances, the time of your life. Whilst once you've sorry, once you've written it, that's a document of it at that particular point in your life. But then you can kind of take it with you almost, and how you present it.
Yeah, totally. And I think that too that if your limitations are your strengths, so if you
Mm,
can make someone feel as connected to a song as they did on the record in a
yeah.
much more stripped back setting, it means that the songwriting has to be strong.
Mm,
Like you can't get away with having a weak song if it's just you and a guitar.
absolutely,
It
yes, you're
it
absolutely right.
the songs, and it takes the songs back to the format in which they were written and demoed.
Yeah.
I do most of my writing in a kind of solitary way,
Mm,
either on the piano or on the guitar, and then I take it to my producer, and we build the songs, with a band in a real room.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, when in the current format of the live show, yeah, it's very much going back to how they were originally conceived.
I mean, that way of writing your songs, doing it, sort of solitary, is that, I mean, that I presume that's always the way that you've done it. That's a kind of personal preference that just suits you more.
Yeah, I mean, I've written with other people as well.
Mm.
I'm not a great co-writer. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, which, there's rooms of people writing songs all the time,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and 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 I love and respect them for that. I think it's really cool. For myself, I kind of came to songwriting as an extension of my love of poetry, which
Mm.
is very much a solitary
Yeah.
effort,
Yeah.
and so much of this particular record is about me trying to condense some of my own experiences into songs, and
Yeah.
I wanted to write them on my own
Yeah.
in that sense. I wouldn't rule out co-writing in the future though, because I think it's really, it's
Yeah.
fun to create with other people. And
Yeah.
and certainly, like, the recording process artistically is enormously collaborative, and
Mm.
that's where, that's a great thing to be able to do too.
'Cause I guess you got to, when you think about it, you have your, kind of musicians that are sort of performing, recording with you. You have your producer. There are obviously, other people involved in it, and I always think about the dynamics of those sort of the human dynamics of those sort of arrangements, where, you have your personality and how you respond to certain situations and certain, let's call them triggers or whatever, and other people are the same. They may be completely different to you. It's just interesting. I always find it fascinating. I think I'm a little bit of a nerd about this, about how humans like manage to work things out.
Yeah. I mean, it's a kind of, it's a wonderful puzzle
Yeah.
making a record and trying things out, or at least it is for me. I
Mm,
don't go into some people go into the record making process very distinct ideas in mind about, oh, we're going to have this type of keyboard on this track and this kind
yeah.
of problem set, but I'm not really like that.
Yeah.
And place, a huge part of the Resurrection Game album was recorded at a residential studio on the Isle of Wight called
Mm,
Chale Abbey, and so that meant that all of the band
mm,
and the producer and the engineer, they were all staying in the recording
yeah.
studio
yeah,
overnight. So it's a little bit like being on a weird musical school camp. And,
yes, yes,
it's funny because I wrote the record, it's got these, it's quite a solemn record in a
yeah,
way because, but that's just, I mean, that's the timbre of my voice,
yeah,
and I love Sinead O'Connor and I love
yeah,
Emmylou Harris and Linda Ronstadt. I've got a sad sounding voice, so it doesn't
yeah.
really. If I sing like a party song, it sounds like it's like watching someone in dress up. It's very unconvincing. Um, but but it's funny because it's a solemn sounding record, but I can assure you that as a band and a group of people making a project together, um, we had a really fantastic time. It's a really beautiful recording studio,
Yeah,
and we'd sort of we'd finish the day's recording and then toddle up the street to the White Mouse Inn, which was the nearby
yeah.
pub, have
Oh,
pints and
there's some traditions that you just you can't meddle with them.
yeah, yeah, and it was with a bunch of American guys on this record, and so they were all just loving being in
Yeah.
grey and rainy England in January,
Oh, I
and
bet. Yeah, I bet there was something. There is something unique about that, isn't there? About that, or I guess sort of isolation. Whether it's the island itself feels just because it's an island, sort of feels remote from you're not
mm,
connected to the UK, or whether it's the town itself where the studio was. That's quite. It's and in January as well.
yeah.
Yeah,
Jordan Lanning, the producer, loves Britain and goes
yeah,
from Nashville to Britain as often as he can.
yeah.
He's the person who introduced me to that recording studio,
Right.
and it was just perfect. It was just the exact right place to make that record.
I remember that there was I had a chat a couple of years ago with um uh Elizabeth Electra and Stuart Braithwaite. Stuart's in the band Mogwai, and
Yeah,
they formed this other band called Silver Moth, and they formed it during lockdown with another bunch of musicians, most of whom didn't know each other. I think maybe Elizabeth knew one person, Stuart knew another, but apart from that, they didn't know each other. I think there were seven in the band. They got together in a studio up in Scotland, a similar thing, but a very remote studio up in one of the Scottish islands to record an album, to write and record an album. And that was just sort of fascinating for me, given my nerdiness about how these dynamics work. They produced this sort of remarkable record. Wrote it, recorded it, and it was just amazing. And it was interesting listening to them talking about how they approached it, how they felt. Given that they didn't know people didn't know each other, and
yes.
Stuart was more sort of comfortable, Elizabeth perhaps less so, a bit more nervous. It's just interesting how that sort of works. Did you guys all know each other?
Some of the players I'd met before,
Yeah,
and others I'd not
yeah,
met
right,
before.
right.
So it was
Yeah,
fresh,
yeah,
and I think that adds an interesting dynamic,
doesn't it? Yeah,
especially yeah. Yeah, I'd worked with Jordan, the producer,
mm,
before, and then
yeah,
his brother I'd not met before. He's the engineer,
yeah,
and yeah, some of the other folks I'd seen them play and admired them play, but I'd never actually hung out in a studio
yeah.
with them.
So when I mentioned this quote of yours about the redemptive power of art, I mean, do you have a do you have a I mean, I've tried to work this out. What it is about whatever form of art that feels so powerful. Where it's almost like a sort of go to when you're in sort of difficult times yourself. That it does have that redemptive power. I don't know why.
I think there's just something very beautiful about. I mean, across all different art forms, but in the
Mm,
music, for me. when I put on a record and it feels like someone is singing my life back to me,
Yeah.
but it's from their own experience, I just I love that feeling.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid and, again, it was the 90s, so I had a Walkman and
Yes.
I
Yes.
and it wasn't even a Discman. We didn't have much money. I wasn't allowed a Discman. I had to have cassettes.
Yep. I
So I
know the
had a
feeling.
Walkman
Yes.
and I used to go get the Walkman and play it on the bus to school. And I had this Simon and Garfunkel cassette, and I'd listen to Paul Simon singing the song America,
Yeah.
and it just used to make me cry.
Mm.
Just like that. We've all gone to look for America, and then and that got planted in my brain when I was 13, and
Yeah.
now I've been on the New Jersey Turnpike. I've counted the cars. I've seen the things that that happens in that. So it's something
Yeah.
quite
I know what you mean. When it's you hear something and when you haven't been there, you have a visual of it, and then when you actually do go there to that place, yeah, really
yeah.
wild.
Or it is wild, and I've just always put on records, to party, and
Mm,
as like I make this sort of very emotional, folk adjacent music, like
yeah.
my favorite singers are Sandy Denny and
Mm,
Marianne Faithfull, that kind of, pretty old fashioned stuff.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I do I like that mournful stuff. But then I
Mm,
also, I love pulp.
yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
Amazing.
Oasis. I love Blur.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
LCD Sound System. So
Yeah.
I love garage rock too and punk, and so I've got my tastes are more eclectic than the
Yeah.
music that I personally make.
Did you see? You may not have seen it. Did you see that Pulp played at the Glastonbury Festival
I
here?
did,
Did
yeah.
you see that set?
I didn't. I saw that it happened. I didn't watch the show.
If you ever do get a
Um,
chance, it was superb. It was so good.
I'm going to see them next month in Detroit, and I'm
Oh, amazing!
very.
Oh, you'll have a blast.
they're
Do you know?
not. They're not coming to Nashville, and but they're coming to
We're
Detroit,
going
so
to
I'm going to get on
Detroit.
a
Oh well,
plane.
that's a
Yeah,
great way to get to see them for sure. Oh, they were so good. You'll have an
yeah,
absolute blast seeing them. They were so good. It's like
yeah.
it's
So
like
like
it's
I
like
love
he's
that.
no go on.
No, no, no. I was just yeah. I mean, I love Jarvis as a front man. I find him charismatic
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
hilarious, and like a really hot English professor or something.
It's
He's
like he has not changed.
uh,
He has not changed at all.
uh,
It's just
mhm.
incredible. But anyway, yeah, I digress. Yeah. So the so this kind of question, the sort of the of the power of art. I mean, with it, with making this record, what what do you think you've learnt about yourself?
Oh, I've learned loads about myself.
Mm,
I'm not as afraid of my feelings as I once was.
mm,
I used to have I was raised Catholic and I'm not
yeah.
Catholic anymore, but I'm lapsed Catholic and I always like to say I've got all of the guilt and none of the God. But, like feelings were not to be shared in
Yeah.
the place that I grew up in, and I think learning how to write songs has been a real challenge to that.
Mm,
And so, what have I learned? I've learned that it's okay to share your feelings.
yeah.
That you can actually, when you get them out and when you sing them, other people can connect to them and relate
Yeah.
to them. I've also learned that um, there's something quite beautiful in being able to do that.
Mm,
Um, I've I've also learned that things take time.
yeah.
We live in a world where it's all very instant, and how
Time
fast can
feels
you get
scarce,
things
doesn't it?
out?
Mm.
But it's very, this record took time to
Mm.
make, and I'm glad of that. I also, I think that I've just learned how much I love doing it too.
Yeah.
Like I've
Yeah.
got a couple of projects that I'm working on at the moment that I'm really excited about, and I just I think that getting to make stuff is
Yeah.
just it's a really worthwhile way to spend one's
Isn't it?
life, you know. And I'd
Because
encourage anybody to do it, whether you're going to go pro with it or whether you're just doing it to kind of express yourself. Like, I think that it doesn't matter. I just think that
mm,
it's really, you learn so much about yourself in the process, and
mm,
you know working with other people to make something out of nothing is
yeah.
it's a lovely thing to do.
It's interesting, like, you're sort of talking about, your how you were brought up, with, maybe not talking about your feelings. I mean, I had I guess, a sort of similar. I was brought up, sort of Church of England Protestant.
Mm.
We kind of went to church till I was about maybe 13, and then
Mhm.
I'd started to kind of had enough of that. I mean, it was, maybe I was a little bit older, but that kind of mid-teenish sort of area, just before mid-teens, you start to.
Yeah.
There were other things that I was starting to rebel against, and it was not that I had a, repressive childhood in any way. I was an only child, but it was, for me, it was like that the spotlight always felt like it was on me. You know,
Okay.
and I had to kind of. I felt like I had to sort of change that, but sharing feelings, yeah, was something that we didn't really do as a kind of that sort of three family. We didn't really do it. We did some things, but anything kind of intimate, or it just didn't happen. And it's strange, isn't it, how that stays with you? That experience
Totally.
kind of becomes you, doesn't it?
Yeah, I had to completely unlearn that behavior
Mm,
if I wanted
yeah,
to make art, if I wanted to write songs.
yeah, that's
I
true.
And it's interesting because I write poems as well, and I don't poems feel, compared to songs, because songs are dressed up with instrumentation and melody and all of that. Um, Poems feel fully clothed. Songs feel fully clothed, but poems still feel a little bit to me like walking down the street naked.
True.
So
Yes, yes, yeah,
I haven't shared any of them yet. I wouldn't rule out sharing them, but I've still got some way
yeah.
to go, I think,
I think that
in that.
you're really right about that. Almost like, kind of music where it's the sort of vocal and instrumentation. The instrumentation sort of puts the clothes on the vocals, or vice versa, or something like that. But you're
Yeah,
right, where it's just the words. It's like, okay, there's nothing else to think about. You're just looking at the words.
yeah, here I
It's,
am. Yeah,
yeah,
I'd like to get to a point where I will add that to my list of,
yeah.
future goals. Um,
Oh, you should do it, definitely. Well, it's easy for me to say, isn't it? No, but it's interesting because I started, like, one of the things that I sort of rebelled against was, I played the cello when I was a kid, and I did all my exams, all my sort of practical exams, did a bit of the theory, hated the theory, but I did all the sort of the practical exams, and then kind of gave it up. But since both my parents died a few years, about 3 years ago, and I started playing again, and I think there was something of this going back to my childhood, that
wow.
brought these, because it was really my dad's project. He wanted me to do
Yeah, so it
this,
was
and
important to him.
it was important to
Yeah.
him. And as a teenager, I didn't want to hear about that. You know, eventually, I just kind of like, I've done my exams. That's it. I'm going to give up. Never
Well,
touched it again for 30 odd years.
oh, wow, and now you've picked it up again.
I picked it up again. I went into this into a music store in Soho,
Mm,
and just kind of said, "Look, I haven't played for blah blah blah." I said, "Would you mind if I just played again?" And he said,
mm,
"Sure, go into this." Fortunately, it was like this. little room where you could close the door so nobody could hear me.
Yeah.
But honestly, Emma, when I sort of there were about 3 cellos on the wall. I got hold of it in the neck in my arm, in my hand, and then just
Mm.
all these feelings came back, all these memories and
Yeah.
feelings came back. It was really like I was surprised at how powerful it was. But I was very rusty, but you still I still remembered all the stuff. And anyway, so it's ended up now. I've yeah, I'm sort of playing again. I'm practicing. I'm getting some like pedals and things like that. And I don't know where it's going. I'm not really bothered about where it's going. But talking about unlearning things that I've had to unlearn, I guess that framework of learning in a structured classical framework.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? To try and do
Yeah.
these different
Well,
things now.
it can take the joy out of it, like, if you're doing it, if it's someone else's goal
Yeah,
for you to do it. I mean, that's probably for me, that's sport. Like,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
I was a musical kid in an unmusical family,
Right,
and but
right,
my dad was like Mr. Sport. So
right.
for my 11th birthday, he could have got me a guitar, but he got me a cricket bat instead.
Wow,
And, uh,
wow. Way to go, Dad.
yeah, yeah. So, parents are funny like that,
Oh yeah,
how much they instill in it. And, to his credit though, he was a big lover of music. It was just not
yeah,
something he had the skill set to do. So he got me loads of my first records and really into
yeah.
listening to stuff. So it wasn't all bad. I was just never going to fulfill his dream of being a great sportswoman.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, but I guess maybe more so for that generation. I'm thinking of the generation of my parents. I mean, I'm 57 now, so I was born in '68.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents there was certainly more of a I think because they had that as well of this is more children didn't think for themselves as much, if that makes sense. Even though they weren't like that. There's sometimes a subconscious way that they sort of approach things, and I certainly got a sense that if I didn't do some things, my dad wouldn't be happy, and I would know it.
Yes.
Not overtly, but just you know subtly would be
Yeah.
some discontent. But no, it's yeah, just all those kind of learned experiences from from when you were a kid is sort of fascinating. So as you're kind of growing up, what kind of people were you hanging out with? What sort of people did you kind of gravitate towards?
Like at school or at,
Yeah, school as your school, kind of going through teens and whatever.
well, when I was a teenager, I was definitely in the kind of, I guess, alternative
Mm,
crowd, mid
yeah,
90s. I was a big nerd,
yeah,
big
yeah.
big nerd, and it was very. My parents were both school teachers, so that
Right.
expectation I would achieve good grades and get
Yeah.
into a good university was pretty high. Um,
Mm,
and that kind of instilled a brutal perfectionism in me that was also not very helpful when that was something I had to unlearn if I was going to
yeah.
go out and make art. But so the people that I was hanging out with at school were like the alternative kids, like I used to rock up, to my PE class in my silver Doc Martens and my corduroy pants and
Brilliant.
like
Brilliant.
run around the oval. Um, yeah, I mean, I grew up in regional Australia, so pretty remote. 5 hours from Sydney, 5 hours drive from Sydney, 5 hours drive from Melbourne in
Yeah.
the pre-internet era. And all I wanted to do, the town I grew up in had a population of about 50,000 people, and
Wow.
all I wanted to do was leave. I was just desperate to get out,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
as soon as I finished school, I'm out of here, folks. And I went to Sydney, and Sydney was fantastic because
Yeah.
I basically I just wanted to go to uni and listened to bands all the time, which
Yeah.
is what I did. And so all my
Yeah.
friends became sort of music loving people and theatre kids and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
I
And that
remember,
was really cool.
I had a similar kind of experience. I mean, it was sort of small town in the north of England, and my mum said to me for years and years and years, she would never fail to say this: when you reached 18, you couldn't wait to leave. You couldn't wait to
Yeah.
leave. And I went to live in Liverpool, um,
Right.
which was like kind of it wasn't that far away from my mum and dad's. It was close enough to kind of that it wasn't too difficult to get back, but it was
Mm.
away from them. That was the important thing. But you kind of I needed that. I must have needed that. That was what I wanted to do.
Of course. Yeah, I've always been very because I love going out and seeing shows. So I was
Mm.
never going to stay in regional Australia because there just weren't enough shows happening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Every time I wanted to see a band, I had to go to Sydney. So that's what I did. And I'm still like that now. Like one of the reasons I live in Nashville is it's such a musically rich city. I
yeah,
mean, people kind of think that it's just a country music town, but it's really not. It's actually
yeah.
it's musically pretty diverse.
Is it? Is it?
Yeah,
Is there something about cities that kind of motivates you?
I love the electricity of a city.
Yeah, yeah,
There's something about it that's just
yeah,
glorious, walking around cities and getting to know them. And there's all kinds of cities, that I've not lived in, but I like to go,
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
and partly like I love going to New York because it's got so much cool history and so many of my favorite
Absolutely,
artists have spent time in New York,
absolutely. Yeah,
Bob Dylan sort of became Bob Dylan in New York, or
yeah,
Lou Reed, like the quintessential New York cat, and I'm a huge Lou Reed fan. Debbie Harry, all of that,
yeah.
stuff. New York's not as gritty as it once was, but I love going to New York, and I get very excited going to New York.
Me too.
But
Yeah,
one of the reasons for that too is that I've never had the brutal reality of trying to live in New York. So
yeah,
I've always
yeah,
it's like having a crush on someone, but they've never become your boyfriend or your girlfriend. So you never really find out, the shittier aspects of
yeah.
that.
Exactly. Yeah, you kind of like
feeling.
have these kind of like rose tinted glasses almost. I feel exactly the same. Exactly the same.
I love London too. I think London's
Yeah.
just the most amazing city, but I did live there for a while and it kicked my ass.
Did it?
It was
Yeah.
too hard for me.
It was that more in terms of kind of getting things done, or just tough to.
I I think I'd moved there a little bit too late in the game.
Yeah,
When I moved, when you're younger, you're a little bit braver, and
yeah, yeah.
so I moved
Absolutely.
to Sydney at 18 and I moved to Nashville at 30. And
Mm.
when I moved to London, it was during the pandemic. So
Okay.
I was just a little bit too isolated in the
Yeah,
UK. And
yeah,
partly the Resurrection Game, the album, is there's a lot of loneliness in that
yeah,
album. And I'm actually a quintessentially pretty social and extroverted person. But
yeah.
in the UK, because of the pandemic and because I was a bit older and I didn't have an established network of people,
Mm.
I found myself quite lonely,
I can understand.
so
Yeah, yeah.
and I think that cities can do that to people too.
Totally.
Cities can be quite isolating.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I mean, living through that. I mean, everybody's got the different experiences of COVID and that time, but going from a busy, populated, heavily populated city to what happened through COVID was so weird. I mean, it was just to go to this shell. That's what it was, and you did make you realize that okay, what makes a city what it is,
Mm.
and the energy of the people is clearly one of the a major thing, and that was just missing.
Yeah.
It was so weird. But I can totally appreciate that it could be, at that time going there, not having your network around you is pretty isolating. I can understand that.
Yeah, and it did sort of, it did get better in that, I lived in a really great part of town and lots of good books. London just seemed to, for me, it was like a place where there was all kind of ways I could spend money. Like there were
Yeah,
like so many good places to eat,
yeah,
fantastic bookshops, like
yeah,
just like wonderful bookshops and groovy record stores and all of that
yeah,
kind of stuff. But then in terms of like get me trying to get any work done as a
yeah,
musician, it's
yeah.
really
What
difficult.
what part were
But
you
I
in?
E8 or N1, so
Okay, yeah,
around
yeah, yeah.
Islington.
No, no, oh, no, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, extremely creative.
Yeah, very great part of the city.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, One of the things that you talked about a while ago was making work that's when you talk about performing in front of a live audience is how they relate to that relatability. And I guess relatability has been, for me, is sometimes has been a word that got overused quite a lot. It sort of start to sort of lose a little bit of its meaning for me, but I still think it's an incredibly important thing to have for for kind of like human relationships, and how, and I guess so much more so for artists and how they connect with with their fans.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's part of, to me, that's the most enjoyable part of it. For
Mm,
absolutely going and connecting with people and talking about stuff. So, like
yeah,
before the Resurrection Game album, the album that I did before that was all Bob Dylan
Bob
songs.
Dylan. Yeah, yeah,
And I'm a huge Dylan fan, and that record has connected me with so many. Like it's just got me on the super highway of Bob Dylan nerds. And after every single gig that I play, someone wants to come up and talk to me about, oh man, I just went and saw Dylan on tour, or have you heard this like latest, you know,
yeah,
reissue outtakes album? And I love that,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's,
yeah,
I think that's where I really relate to other music people, is that, like I wasn't, I started singing when I was really young.
yeah,
Um, uh, but I love being in the audience as much as I love performing for an audience. Like
yeah. I
I
get you.
going and seeing a gig to me is, it's that's probably where all of that lapsed Catholicism, where all that
Yeah,
energy from that's gone, in that going and seeing a show to me is a spiritual experience.
yeah,
I I love, I love live music,
yeah,
and like I was listening to the BBC Six radio coverage of Oasis,
mm,
and just the seeing all of these people, in their
yeah,
tens of thousands coming together,
yeah.
it's really powerful.
I know.
It's pretty special.
Do you know it's interesting you mention that, because just Friday night. So I am like a big fan of Killing Joke,
Mhm.
and obviously, I think it was, what are we talking now, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, when Geordie, the guitarist, died,
Yeah,
and the band, there were plans happening for the band, and they've obviously sort of fallen apart. But Paul, the drummer, formed a new band. Well, in fact, he formed a new band before, but now that is sort of coming to light, and obviously, then that band has got, there's a few, quite a lot of Killing Joke fans that are now following his new band, Light of Eternity, and
yeah,
they're on their first tour. They're doing some solo dates, but some other dates with Ministry, and so there's a coming together at the 100 Club in London on Friday night,
mhm.
and there's a lot of people there that I had not seen for such a long time,
Wow.
that I'd got to know through Killing Joke, and I saw Paul as well, and it was just this. And then you get the music as well,
Yeah.
and they're talking, about some fairly powerful things about what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
Sort of technology, fascism. A lot of these sort of big sort of topics, and there's a catharsis in sort of being there and almost like experiencing that with people that you almost like reconnect with physically.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's it's it's nice, and it's also terribly poignant though. There are a lot
Yeah,
of people who come into that show feeling grief in their heart
yeah,
because they
uh,
can't, the band they loved cannot
yeah,
play. So
exactly,
they're
yeah,
getting, but they're carrying on the tradition of, by going and seeing this new band and
yeah,
celebrating this work, and
yeah,
that's a wonderful
yeah,
thing.
and I think that sort of going back to this sort of relatability. I think it also sort of helps with I mean, there's an authenticity, isn't there, in or clearly in what you're writing about, because you're going from very sort of personal sort of experiences, and what your feelings are is how you've emerged from that, and that is such a powerful thing to have. That kind of like authentic experiences that you've had.
Well, I think it's really important, and I get that, like, for some people, they don't feel the need to put that stuff in song or
Yeah,
whatever. But I'm trying to be as candid as I can,
yeah, yeah,
because I think
yeah,
that is, like, I had a a a pretty epic nervous breakdown that was not a walk in the park on any level.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that even just acknowledging that publicly later on down the line and saying, "But, I'm on the other side of it.
yeah,
I went through something fairly, catastrophically challenging," I would
yeah, yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I came through the other side, and I think that that is kind of what art is there to do as
It's
well,
very true.
to tell those stories and experiences,
Yeah,
and, uh, and then, hopefully, yeah, it kinda come come through that, is because life is like that, like it's,
yeah,
I think that, if you're lucky enough to live long enough, you
yeah.
really, eh, we're we're born, we die, and in between, like, a whole lot of stuff can happen,
Can just
whether
happen.
it's,
Yeah,
life just, every so often a bomb drops on you. And I'd been cruising for a while in terms of, like, before I had my nervous breakdown, I'd been having a pretty chill run of things. Even the
mm,
pandemic wasn't that bad on me. I got some stuff done. I put out a
yeah,
record, and
yeah.
so I hadn't had like a heavy period of anything too nasty for about 20 years. So in a way, my number was up. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's
Like, Emma,
time.
your time's here. Go on.
You can
Yeah,
handle it.
yeah. But no, I think yeah, that's very right. And there's obviously kind of you know you've got through that, and from strength of mind, support network, people to sort of help you through, and also the music as well, and what's been sort of produced.
Totally. Well, the first things that actually got me through when I was very unwell was I read a book by a British writer called Horatio Clare, and
Mm,
he's usually he's a nature writer and a travel
yeah,
writer, but he had a breakdown when he was in his early 40s, and he wrote about his experience of
yeah,
that. And he lost his mind and drove his car into a river in Hebden Bridge, and
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was messy, really
Wow.
messy. But he's such a wonderful writer, and he wrote this book called Heavy Light, and that uh, that was the thing that got me through. I read that
Yeah.
book, and wow, okay, he
So it's,
also, so
so it's reading other experiences and seeing. that other
Yeah,
people have confronted this, and
and it's sort of, it's a cliche, that that sort of idea of Japanese KonMari art, where you break something and then you glue it
yeah,
back together, bits of gold.
yeah,
But there's something to be said that, like, life can blow up and you can still be okay, I think.
yeah. With I mean, for you, how much does your instinct, what kind of part does instinct play? Your gut instinct, relying on your instinct, what role does that play in your life?
Oh, a huge amount.
Mm,
I've got a very, the kind of brain that if I don't act on the thought,
yeah.
then thousand other thoughts have happened and it's not, so I
Right.
like to,
Okay.
and I'm also, for better or worse, a little bit, romantic and a little bit delusional. So I
Mm,
will just, like, I I'll make a plan, but, like, if a flashing light comes up and then something cool is happening in another
yeah.
direction, the plan gets abandoned. It's
Yeah.
and that's not always helpful. I would like to think that, I'm trying to get better at finishing things.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Okay.
um, but because I can be a procrastinator. But yeah, instinct is
Yeah.
huge. Like when I moved to Sydney at 18,
Mm,
that was me going,
yeah.
I'm just going to go. This university looks like it might be fun. I didn't
Yeah.
thoroughly research it. Same when I moved to Nashville, I was like, oh, I think I'm going to go to Nashville. I went there once for a week. It
Yeah.
seemed fun, and then, it's like,
But
you
that's
know,
great. That's great, isn't it? That's almost like, because we do have I think generally we do have this sort of, in many parts of our lives, to become more risk averse as we get older,
totally.
and
Hmm.
lose that kind of abandon, but kind of, I'm not going to call it reckless abandon, but you know what I mean, of youth, where you just say, fuck it, just going to go and just do this, and that's
Hmm.
fine. You just, and then the consequences come and you work it out, because most situations, we work it out.
Yeah, and problems. I think that's why I like traveling so much. Is that there's a
Mm,
part of me that really likes problem solving.
yeah, yeah,
So, and when you're on tour, as a musician, that's problem solving every day. It's
every
going,
day,
okay,
yeah,
where are we going to stay? Where's the nearest coffee shop? Is there
yeah,
a good local record store? How do we? And I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
the internet obviously makes things a hell of a lot easier
yeah.
than it used to be.
I do think I do. I had this for a long time. This sort of battle of one side of my personality being that I analyze things,
Yeah.
and kind of like, okay, well, if like a situation comes up, it's okay. Well, if I do that, then what's going to be the implications of that? And then if I do that, what's going? Like, God's sake, then there would be my kind of instinctive side that would say, that would just do what an instinct does. But I would have this. You mentioned procrastination, almost like, kind of like, yeah, this analysis of things. I'm much better now at trusting my instinct, because it's 99%, it's right
Yes.
when you do
Yeah.
trust it.
I mean, it's good to have a part of you that's, in reality
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah.
Um, it's like
But it
you
can
have to have
drive
it,
you.
but it can
Like, stop.
drive you mad. And yeah, and instinct is like, it's fun, but also it can be terribly impractical.
Yeah,
Um, but I think for, for making music and doing art stuff, I
yeah.
think that's really great. I wish that I was a little bit more like, I really love visual art, and I think one of
Mm,
the reasons I love visual art is because I don't make visual art myself.
yeah,
And unfortunately, like, my designated reality person in my head has sort of like it. I could make visual art,
Yeah.
but I'm not willing to let myself be as bad as I'm going to need to be to get good.
Right.
And
Okay. Yeah.
so like I think so I still have that too on a different level of like, why don't I just spend some time doing that?
Well,
I've that's going with my instinct there, but then my judgmental side says, you're crap at
well,
drawing. You've always been crap
well,
at drawing.
well.
Don't bother.
So so maybe this will help. So I had the same thing. I'd always been interested in visuals, but I'd never done any art. I always thought I was rubbish. I would always compare myself to other people and see what
Mhm.
they're doing has been, you know, like way better than anything that I could do. So I just didn't do it. And but about when was it? I think it was 2022. So three years ago, I saw it was the Pixies album Doggerel when that was released. The
Mhm.
design, I think the guy does all the design, Chris Big. It was like black and red, visually very striking, but real straight lines. Very I would say fine artist, but somebody who really knows the rules of visual art. And I thought I'm going to give myself a go at that. And so I did a short online course with UAL in London.
Yeah.
And then what came out of that, the style that appealed to me was completely different. So I mean, you couldn't get any more different. It was like basically David Carson from the magazine Raygun in the 90s. Very kind of distressed, grungy, you
Yes.
know, like all over the place.
Mhm.
That really appealed to me, and that's what I do now. I now do. I have like alongside this podcast, I have a zine where I do interview bands and do all the graphic design for it.
That's so cool.
Oh,
I
and honestly, Emma, I would, if you get time, I I mean, this was so unlike me to do this, but I just
mm,
did it. My partner Saskia just said, "Just do it,
yeah.
just do it."
I love
What have you got to lose? And I would done
That's
everything.
wonderful. And, yeah, and I think it's, like, as you get older, it becomes harder to do that, but it's worth staying connected, it's worth
Yeah,
going back.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Just one last thing is about like emotional intelligence
Mhm.
and how what how you view the importance of so things like empathy and kind of self-awareness, things like that, about what sort of role they play in your life. Because I feel that like emotional intelligence is like in how we get through life now is so important, that we know how to relate to others, how to be with others, be a decent person with others.
Yeah. I think it's really, I mean, I think we're probably living in a great deficit of
Mm,
emotional intelligence right now,
yeah,
and I think partly that is, technology is to blame.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
there's something about the way that our human brains are wired, and this may change as people are raised with computers, but for those of us who weren't, it's that thing of like people will be incredibly rude via email because
yeah,
they forget
yeah.
that there's a human being
Very true.
on the receiving end of that email or
Yeah,
on the phone, or it's or in Facebook comments or
true.
YouTube
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
comments. I mean, one of the most challenging things about putting out art now is that you can't care too much about feedback.
yeah,
But if you're a self-managed artist like myself, or a
yeah,
podcaster, you're putting out a podcast, like
yeah,
there isn't a middle person who's
yeah.
going to protect you from that feedback. If I get a ding on my YouTube that says
Very
this
true.
song sucks, it's
It's going straight into your brain, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
partly, when I made this record, it's about partly of me trying to be the best person that I can be in an increasingly brutal and
Yeah.
challenging world. Like it's weird. I live in America. The political situation here at the moment is absolutely repugnant,
Mm.
and yet I go on tour. I'm on a 30-date tour, and every night I'm talking to the loveliest,
Yeah.
kindest,
Yeah.
softest people, and they're
Yeah.
so good. And there are
Yeah.
so many people who feel absolutely devastated by what's going on in the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
what's going on in this country in particular.
Mm.
And yeah, people are just heartbroken. But if you watch the news, if you're in the UK watching
Yeah.
the news, all you get is, oh gosh, Americans are stupid. And
The
then,
horror, the
you know,
horror side. Yeah. Yeah. The negative. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Absolutely.
I mean, I remember when Brexit happened in the
Yeah.
UK. I was in London. We were there for work, and just
Mm.
like everywhere you went the day after the Brexit
Yeah.
vote, you'd be going into a coffee shop that was managed by an Italian person, or
Yeah.
like
Absolutely right. Just
it just the lack of empathy, because I think that people get sold something that
absolutely.
they buy into this idea that some people are less than, or
Absolutely.
I just, it just, it's awful thinking
You
about
totally.
that. And you just try and be the best. All we can do is just try and be the
Yeah.
best that we can do. And it's that cliche of, like, be kind, but then, like, do you have to be kind to the guy
Mm.
in the backwards mega hat? You know, do
Yeah.
you?
I know.
Who doesn't want women to have reproductive rights? Like
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
the punky side of my personality, the raging side
The
wants to
raging
go
side.
get into a biff. But so it's I think it would be great if emotional intelligence was taught in schools.
Absolutely.
You know,
I couldn't agree with you more.
I left school with very good grades in English and history and music, but I had
Mm.
absolutely no life skills.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Agreed.
file a tax return,
Yeah.
couldn't, didn't have any kind of emotional understanding of the struggles of other people. It's only through
Yeah.
going out, living life and working with other people, and that
I
I've
think I
learned.
totally agree with you. I totally agree. It's it's baffling. It's baffling, but it's not baffling why it's not taught in schools. I mean, from like almost because you think of kids like from it's only when they start socializing with other kids and kind of going out into the world where these other things come in. Up to then, it's like purely instinctive kind of behavior. Then
Yes.
the other learned behavior starts to come in. And if emotional intelligence is not taught about how you conduct yourself, how you empathize with other people, how you socialize with other people, you like you say, those are life skills, and you don't have them. And if you're
Yeah.
learning from a bad environment, I mean, it's something you see why it sort of passes through generations and things don't change.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really important. But anyway, Emma, thank you so much. It's been an honor to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's just been, it's been a delight.
It's been brilliant. So you're off out on tour again. Got a couple of dates this week, and then finish off the rest of the tour, and then the album comes out.
Album comes out, yeah. So it's a lot of work, but it's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. This is the fun stuff.
I think that the release part of doing a record is just like it's really satisfying. The
Yeah,
relief,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
you're in that pressure cooker, and then the relief of, oh my gosh, and now here's the thing.
yeah.
But But yeah, it's it's
One thing,
nice to do.
one thing I was going to ask you, I forgot. Like about the kind of the live shows. Do you get nervous before you go on stage?
A little bit, but just a
Mm,
healthy amount.
healthy amounts.
Not
Yeah,
not
yeah,
so much that I not so much that I, have to down a bottle of vodka or do
yeah,
anything
yeah.
like, I get just enough
Just
nerves,
enough to give you that energy to
give you the
get through.
energy
Yeah, yeah,
and yeah, which is good. And, like,
yeah.
I'm doing a band show on Tuesday, and I've never played with this band before. We've got rehearsals this afternoon,
Amazing. Oh,
and I'm a
terrific.
little bit nervous about that, that dynamic,
Oh,
but
you.
it's gonna be good. I think, like, there's that element of being in a band is a little bit like being in a gang.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
there's
Yeah. That's true.
there's something fun and that about
There's an
it.
energy about it, isn't there? There's a kind of like you build a camaraderie, and
Yeah,
we're kind of in this.
and the team, like,
Yeah.
yeah, and I've never really been in it's nice to have a band. I've never really been in a band myself, like,
Yeah.
um I had a folk duo for a while, but I would like to experiment with, like, just having a band. I think
Yeah.
that is, um, it's got its own unique organism and,
Yeah.
like, the energy of stuff, like, I like the, yeah, I think in the Beatles, the perfect example,
Mm,
like Paul McCartney and John Lennon and George Harrison, they all became better songwriters because they were in a band together,
because of each
sort
other.
of
Yeah.
because of each
True.
other, and the
Yeah.
stakes were raised.
That's very true. That's very true. Oh,
I think
I'm
that
sure it's going to work out. I'm sure it's going to work out, and well, they're in the immediate, the rehearsals, and then the shows, and then the release, and all power to you.
thanks. I
So
really
pleased that things are
appreciate
out there.
that.
That's all.
Yeah, well, thanks for being so kind and for listening to the record.